Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Cutting Edge Figure Skating Podcast. My name is Kim Dunaway, and in this episode, I've got a little bonus coverage, and I'll be doing a career look back on the GOAT, Michelle Kwan. And I have been so fortunate that I started watching figure skating at the 92 Olympics. And so I really got to see the entirety of Michelle Kwan's career, which was very long, as she was always chasing an Olympic gold medal that unfortunately for her would never come. But on the way there, she had just a tremendous amount of success and is the most decorated figure skater that US has ever seen. And I think it's safe to say we'll ever see again, at least in terms of national titles and probably world titles as well. So this particular project took longer than what I had anticipated, but I wanted to make sure that I did this justice because she is such a fantastic skater, and I'm excited to bring this to you. So I do my career lookbacks first with a retrospective of their careers, and then I'll end the episode by ranking all of her senior competitive programs. So Michelle was born in Torrance, California, July 7th, 1980, and she was the third child of Danny Kwan and Estella Kwan. Danny from China and Estella from Hong Kong, and they moved to California in the early 1970s. And Michelle's interest in figure skating really began at the age of 5. And she followed in her sister's footsteps, sister Karen, who was also figure skating. And they really began serious training around the time that Michelle was about 8 years old. And they were a normal working class family. Her father helped run a restaurant and also worked on the side, and money was tight, and it was definitely an investment and tough to have not just one child in figure skating but two children in figure skating. And so at times they made a lot of different sacrifices, including selling their house and moving into a family home in Torrance. And then in 1991 they moved to Lake Arrowhead to be closer to be able to train with Frank Carroll, who already at that time was an esteemed figure skating coach. And Michelle says at that time she recalls their very first meeting vividly, and she said she was 11 years old and that she unknowingly set off a pet peeve of his by calling him Mr. Carroll. Call me Frank, he insisted with an eye roll and a smirk, and so Frank he began, she says. So they started what would be a very long and successful relationship. At the 1992 Junior National Championships, she was ninth. So disappointed with that finish that she had. And she told Frank at that time that she would train like crazy to get better. So this was 92 in January. And then in the spring, Frank goes out of town. And Michelle tells her dad that Frank gave the go-ahead for her to go and take her senior test. So Danny Kwan drives her to LA to take her senior test, which she passes. And of course, when Frank Carroll comes back and finds out about this, he is furious because he had not given his go-ahead. He felt like she needed to stay in juniors. And Michelle felt like that she would actually have less pressure if she moved up to seniors, because she felt like there was a lot of really good juniors, and if she moved up to seniors, she would be young, just wouldn't be the same amount of pressure. She already had her jumps, and so on to seniors she went. And so in 1993, she competed at the U.S. Figure Skating Championships at the senior level after finishing ninth at juniors in the year before. And she was the youngest skater since 1973 at 12. And she placed sixth at that particular competition. She was placed behind Nancy Kerrigan, Lisa Irvin, Tanya Kwiatkowski, Tanya Harding, and Nicole Boback. So all notable skaters, especially about 5 of them. So later on in that spring, in April of 1993, her parents officially pulled her out of school and gave her tutors so she could have more time to focus on her skating. At that particular time in her skating, her favorite skater was actually Tanya Harding. She really liked her determination and that she had. Of course, this was before the infamous Tonya Harding and Nancy scandal that would come less than a year later. And so in 1994, at that next Nationals, kind of in the wake of the Nancy Kerrigan attack, of course, Nancy Kerrigan had to withdraw. Tonya Harding won Nationals, but Michelle was second. And she scored very high. And you could even tell if you listen to the commentary of those performances that the judges were surprised by how high that her marks were. I don't think they were expecting her to beat Tanya Kwiatkowski and some of those other skaters. And she was a jumping bean at that point. She obviously hadn't developed a lot of the artistry yet, but she was just 13 at that particular point of time. But she was named the first alternate to the Olympics and actually got to travel to the Olympics because of that. And then Worlds happens. And of course, in the wake of the Olympics, Nancy, like a lot of Olympic medalists do, withdrew from Worlds, and Tonya Harding was embroiled in the controversy and the scandal, and she also did not go to Worlds. So that left Michelle and Nicole Bobeck going to Worlds. And they only had 2 skaters that year because in the previous year, Tanya Kwiatkowski had finished 16th in the qualifying round. This is one of the years that they had qualifying. And so she didn't make the short program. That left Nancy Kerrigan and Lisa Irving, who finished 5th. Nancy Kerrigan did. Lisa Irving finished 13th, which their placements were not high enough to keep 3 spots for the previous year. So they only had 2 spots going into that Worlds. And then Nicole finished 13th in her qualifying group. You had to finish in the top 12 in your qualifying group, so the top 24 would advance to the rest of the competition. She didn't, so that just left Michelle. Michelle was 5th in qualifying, which tied her for 9th, and then she was 11th after the short program. And in order for the U.S. to maintain 2 spots, she had to finish in the top 10, and she was just outside of the top 10. She skated a really strong free program, and she actually finished 8th. And it was a huge accomplishment for her at the time, and it would be far and away her worst finish at Worlds that she would have in her career, as it was literally only up from there. And so after that success that she had at Worlds, she sort of goes into the 95 season kind of poised to be the top American lady. She won 2 medals in the Grand Prix. She got a silver at Skate America in the fall of 94. And a competition that she would actually never lose again. And then she got a bronze medal at Grand Prix France, which was called Trophée de France at the time. That Grand Prix has been so many different names. And she came really in as a favorite at Nationals. However, after the short program, she found herself in 3rd with Tanya Kwiatkowski in 1st, who had actually beaten Michelle at Grand Prix in France, and then Nicole Bobeck in 2nd. But Nicole Bobeck ends up pulling the upset and wins the 95 Nationals, and Michelle ends up 2nd. At Worlds, Michelle skates really well, especially in the free skating. In my opinion, she was underscored based upon how Lu Chen and Surya Bonali and Nicole Bobeck all skated. There were no qualifying rounds at this particular one. They were gone. And so this is how the ordinals went at that 95 Worlds. So going into the free skate, you had Nicole Bobeck, who won the short program. You had a Russian skater named Olga Markova, who was 2nd. Chin Lu or Lu Chin, whichever name you use first, she was 3rd. Surya Bonali was 4th, and Michelle Kwan was 5th going into the free skate. They had a lot of ordinal changing. Lu Chen wins the free skate and ultimately wins that world title. Surya Bonali finishes 2nd in the free skate, moves up to 2nd. Nicole Bobeck finishes 4th in the free skate, but is able to hold on to a bronze medal. And Michelle Kwan finishes 3rd in the free skate, but unfortunately for her, was not enough to move her up to 3rd place. And instead, she was in 4th, and that Russian skater was 5th in the free skate and ends up 5th. So she was very ecstatic when she finished that free skate, and then she had tears and the kiss and cry when she didn't medal, but her time would obviously come. But it's one of those situations where I felt like she was underscored because she was younger, and it's probably one of the reasons that after that 95 Worlds, Frank Carroll said, okay, we've got to do something different. We've got to ditch the ponytail. We've got to add makeup. If you go back and look at Michelle at 93, 94, 95. It's no makeup, ponytails. And Frank felt like she was still looking and being judged as if she were a junior skater. So he goes to Danny Kwan and says, we've got to add makeup. We've got to ditch the ponytail. And Danny was very hesitant to do so, but he finally agreed. He told Michelle, you still no makeup when you're not skating at a competition. In fact, there's a story where Michelle shows up for like it's a practice, but some judges are coming. This happens even to this day, where judges will come to practices in the off season and sort of give you some tips. Well, she showed up with a ponytail, and Frank was like furious, like, you cannot do that. Like, it's got to be in a bun from here on out. She's got to look more poised and more senior. And so when she comes out and unveils her new programs at Skate America, she was really almost unrecognizable. Just a huge, huge difference from the Michelle that we had seen just in the year before. And she won everything that mattered that season. 3 Grand Prix events, Grand Prix final, nationals, and she won worlds. And 2 years away from the Olympics, she looked like the next great American Olympic champion. And then the next season happens. 96 and 97. She just wasn't as sharp. I mean, Michelle was always known for her consistency, but she wasn't as sharp in the Grand Prix. She still won her 2 solo events, but then she lost to Tara Lipinski 3 competitions in a row. First at Nationals, which was probably the worst skate of her career that we've ever seen. It was just this puzzling, like you could hear sort of Peggy Fleming just like, what just happened? Michelle was in the kiss and cry going, what just happened? It was really shocking. She had not lost a competition in over a year at that point, not since the 95 Worlds. And she was kind of due, probably, like nobody typically in skating, especially not in that period of time, in singles, you definitely see dominance like that in ice dance in that period of time. But in singles, I mean, usually people would slip up somewhere, right? And so you kind of figured it was probably a fluke. It wasn't going to happen again. Champions final will come around. That's what they called the Grand Prix final back then. And she'll be back to normal. But she lost to Tara again. And then again at Worlds. And it's like all of a sudden we had a rivalry. You thought that rival was going to be Lu Chen because she had just barely beaten her at the 96 Worlds where Lu Chen was a defending champion. But now there was literally this new kid on the block in Tara Lipinski. And because of that, going into an Olympic year, because I feel like the media wanted to create this rivalry akin to Nancy and Tanya that we had had 4 years prior, which really wasn't a international rivalry, a domestic rivalry, yes, but there was so much hype that became of Tara and Michelle. But there really wasn't much of a contest once they started skating against each other in that fall. They clashed at the 97 Skate America. Tara made mistakes, and Michelle was just absolutely brilliant with her new 2 Olympic programs, and she really looked unbeatable. But unbeknownst to everyone, including her coach, Frank Carroll, she actually had a stress fracture in her second toe on her left foot, and it had been diagnosed in August of that year. The doctor said the injury was a year old, and it was about 90% healed at that point. So Danny made the decision not to tell Frank. And they did not tell Frank until October. And of course, once again, Frank was not happy to not have been told this. And Danny did say later that it was a mistake not to let Frank know what was going on there. There had also been this kind of issue with Michelle and her boots. She'd always worn a certain type of boot, but her father had secured this endorsement deal with Rydell Boots, and she was complaining of foot pain, and she ultimately complained to Carol Heiss about it during the Champions on Ice tour. And she was like, you got to get out of the boots. Like, it's the endorsement, the money that you're getting from that is not worth giving away the Olympic gold medal because of this. Now, they've never to this day blamed the boot manufacturer for the stress fracture, but they also can't rule it out either. So they ended up getting out of that contract and putting Michelle back in her original boots. But November 18th, 1997, an official press release came out that Michelle was out with an injury. She withdrew from the Champion Series finals. She was going to be in a boot for a couple of weeks and be off of the ice during that time. But the idea was that she would be ready to become back by nationals. There was this issue where, Michelle had won skate America, and then she went to skate Canada. And at the very end of her free skate, she fell on like a camel spin, I believe that it was. And everybody was like, what was that? What just happened? I mean, she still won the event. But at the time, it turns out that was sort of part of the issue that she was having with the toe. And the jump that bothered that toe the most was her triple toe, which made it difficult for her to be able to perform the triple toe combo, which was her signature triple combination. She definitely didn't always land it, but what Tara was known for was her technicality. And so that triple combination was just going to sort of give her that extra edge. Because if you look at the way that Michelle was scored in that time, they would give her just amazing scores on her artistic presentation. But that first mark, there was always a little bit of room because she would do an easier jump, a triple toe as her solo jump in the short program, and you would have skaters that would do a triple flip. There would always be a room for it on her in the long program as well, too, because if she didn't do that triple combination, which she didn't do very often, especially in this time period, then there would just be that little bit of room on that technical mark. And so that was something that I do believe that she was hoping to add back into her Olympic program. But with the injury, it just became too painful for her to be able to do that particular combo. Michelle returns at the 98 Nationals to the absolute best marks of her career. She got 15 perfect sixes, 7 in the short program and 8 in the free. And she had 2 judges like in tears. Like, this is a real thing. So everybody's looking at that like, this girl is unbeatable. There's no way that she doesn't win the Olympics. The only way she doesn't win is if she takes herself out. If she re-aggravates this injury, or if she makes a mistake, kind of like she did last year at Worlds or last year at Nationals. In fact, the U.S. was going to the Olympics with 3 national champions and 3 world medalists. You had a national and world champion in Michelle, of course, and then also in Tara, and then you had a national champion and world bronze medalist in Nicole. And so there were even thoughts that there was going to be an American sweep at the Olympics because they felt pretty confident that Michelle and Tara had those first 2 spots locked up. It was going to be one of those 2, but third place was really up for grabs. Lu Chin had a bit of she had kind of fallen off. Surya Bonali had kind of fallen off, and that kind of spot kind of felt like it was up for grabs. So there was even talk about that, just how strong that team was. And then the Olympics happen, and Michelle is brilliant in the short program. And Tara has this short program to like Anastasia, which feels very juniorish, and just have a lot of height on her jumps. And Michelle skates well, and they're 1-2 going into the free skate. And Michelle is up first, and she's up pretty early in her group, which means that the judges usually in that time period with the 6.0s kind of had to hold the marks a little bit. And Michelle skated clean, a little tight, but she skated clean. And in my mind, and I think a lot of the commentators' mind, she just won the Olympics. There's no way that anybody's going to beat her if she didn't make a mistake. Tara Lipinski comes on the ice sometime later, puts down a consistent performance that we really hadn't seen out of her much that year because she had mistakes at Nationals, she'd had mistakes at Skate America, but she put together the performance of her life, including a triple loop combo, and a triple flip, half loop, triple Salchow combo as well. So technically she was far superior to Michelle. Now, you'll hear people say, in hindsight, they feel like the loop was cheated. Those are things that really the old judging system just really didn't account for. Now, you'll hear a coach like Joe Inman say that he would chronically give Tara Lipinski a 0.1 deduction on her technical mark for her fluts. He felt like she often fluts her luts. We hear that all the time now because you absolutely will get an edge call in IGS, right? But that wasn't a thing in 1998. And so whether or not her triples were cheated, she definitely won the technical mark. The question was at that point, are the judges going to give her high enough scores to put her ahead of Michelle? Because back then they actually called the short program usually the technical program, and the free skate would be called the long program or the artistic program. And so in the short program, the technical mark would hold more weight. So in an event of a tie, whoever got the higher technical mark would be higher in the ordinal placement. And in the long program, it was reversed. It would be the artistic mark. And so even though she had skated really well, you still felt like Michelle didn't make a mistake. Michelle's going to win. And the scores came up, and Tara takes the title. And it was very shocking. To this day, I mean, people will debate who they feel like should have won. And we had a similar debate just 4 years prior. You could make the same debate with Nancy Kerrigan and Oksana Bayul. Neither one of them had a fall. They both doubled a jump. Oksana threw a triple toe sort of at the end of her program. Was that the difference that made it? You're always going to have those questions. And Albertville, I mean, both Christy and Midori Ito had a fall. Christy ends up taking the title. There's always going to be certain competitions that are just going to be more subjective than others, that other people are just going to prefer. In 94, I can never really have an opinion because that result was spoiled for me by CBS News. And so watching it, I could never really have the opinion of whether I thought one should have won or not because I already knew the results before it happened. For me, I loved Michelle so much that, of course, I felt like she should have won. I feel the same way about Bearsnaya and Sigralitsa over Selly and Peltier. I just preferred their program. I prefer Yuna Kim over Adelina Sonikova, but it's a subjective sport. And so I also understood how and why Tara won in that moment. But it was heartbreaking for Michelle because you're thinking, she's going to win. She turns professional. She goes off into the sunset. That was the formula back then. And it didn't happen. On that second step of the podium, Michelle was not satisfied and decided that she was going to continue skating. And so at the Worlds, just a month later, she would win her second world title. And behind her was Irina Slutskaya at silver and Maria Butrskaya in bronze, which felt like the most random podium at the time. But oh, how that podium would really shape the next Olympic cycle. And so Michelle goes on, but she has a lot of changes going into the 98-99 season. So for one thing, she cut her hair, that's the thing people do, right? Like people cut their hair whenever there's some kind of great life change. She decided that she was going to go to school full time at UCLA. So she didn't compete in the Grand Prix. She did some Pro-Am events, which at the time skating was hot. Skating was super huge at this point. And so you had a lot of what were called Pro-Am events where you would have kind of the rules of the short program, and then you would have this like interpretive free, which was basically like an exhibition style free skate. And so you would have pro competitors along with amateur competitors. Amateur competitors always had the edge because of the technical part, but usually the artistic, free skate exhibition would count for more of the score, and you would have a lot of professionals that could sort of contend because they were far more entertaining being on the pro circuit and being in shows all the time. So she did some of those, but she didn't have any competition until nationals, and she didn't have any competition at nationals. Like, let's be honest, Tara had moved on, and the new crop of junior skaters were not yet ready to compete with her. Nicole Bobeck was gone at that particular point in time. So she went on to win basically uncontested at nationals. At Worlds, she just was not her best. And she fell on her double axel of all things in her short program. And she ended up fourth. And she stepped out on her triple lutz in the free, and she singled her double axel in the free. And so she actually just got beat fair and square by Maria Butrskaya. And so she was second at that Worlds. And notably, Sarah Hughes, who was just 13 at that Worlds, was seventh then. And so in comes in the 99-2000 season. And so she's decided she's cutting her college load. Like, this is not working. She returned to the Grand Prix. And Michelle starts to get criticism for her jump layout. I mean, there are little whispers of it back leading up into the Nagano Olympics, but now people were really getting onto her about using a triple toe in her short program. And they were really getting onto her about her lack of a triple-triple combination in her free skate. And her choice of a triple-triple combination was the easiest one, the triple toe, triple toe. So I think this was kind of peak criticism sort of for Michelle. And she wins both her Grand Prix, but she loses the Grand Prix final to Irina Slutskaya. And so at this particular time in the Grand Prix final, they had this weird competition format where you had to perform two different free skates. You do a short program, a free skate 1, and a free skate 2. So even though Michelle won the short program and the free skate, which in any ordinary year of the Grand Prix final, Michelle would have won, but here they had a second free skate to do, and she lost that second one to Arina Sutskaya. So that was really sort of a bit of a momentum shift because Irina was the stronger technical skater. She had this, crazy triple Lutz, triple loop combination that she would do at times. And she goes into nationals, and all of a sudden, there's this skater here that nobody knows where she came from, in Sasha Cohen. And Sasha wins the short program. And Michelle falls in the short program, and she finds herself not just behind Sasha, but also last year's Peter medalist and Sarah Hughes. So, and a lot of people thought, should she really have been third? Angela Nikodinov, I believe, was the skater that was fourth at that nationals. So I think it's unlikely that she would have fallen behind Angela Nikodinov. But we know in that old system, if you were in the top three, you just had to win the free skate to win. So yes, it was shocking to see Michelle in third going into the free skate, but you also knew that she basically controlled her own destiny. And all three of them made mistakes in the free skate, which allowed Michelle to win her third consecutive and fourth national title overall. And she goes into the Worlds kind of a little bit of an underdog, and she's trailing both Irina and Maria Butrskaya going into the free skate at Worlds. But she pulls out one of her all-time great performances. Maria Butrskaya, who's leading, ends up third in the free skate, and Michelle narrowly defeats Irina. They actually end up with the same ordinal placements, but because because Michelle won the free skate, she ends up winning the title, which at that time was her third world title. And you could call it an upset at that point, coming from behind. And sometimes I think Michelle did some of her best skating when she was coming from behind. And you kind of have a similar story in the 2001 season, because Michelle actually loses to Irina at Skate Canada before the Grand Prix final, and it's her first loss in a Grand Prix since 1994. And so there's just no competition for her at nationals. Sasha is out with an injury, and Sarah Hughes is just not in Michelle's league yet. So she wins nationals yet again. She goes on to the Grand Prix final a month later and loses to Irina again in that same format with a couple of free skates. And so once again, she goes to Worlds kind of as the underdog yet again. Irina is fresh off of her fourth European title, and she's the leader going into the free skate. But we get just Michelle bringing that magic once more into that free skate. She landed that triple toe, which we hadn't seen her land since probably that same time last year at Worlds. And she wins the title. And what stands out to me so much from that particular Worlds was how emotional Michelle was when she won that title. She wanted it so bad. And she was always a competitor, even into the very last drop. Michelle was always a competitor. There was no quit in her. There was no give up in her. She was going to put forth as much effort as she possibly could. You were going to have to drag those titles away from her. And it was such a great performance, because I think a lot of us, and I can only speak for myself, there were some forums in this time period on the internet, but we were all kind of wondering, like, can Michelle do it at the Olympics, a year from now? Like, Irina's really on kind of a steamroll right now, and Michelle just isn't where she's at technically. And she be her program starting to become kind of stale. And that, with that performance, just like put her back in everybody's mouth. She put her back where she was supposed to be as the favorite going into the Olympic season. So we go into the Olympic season looking forward to seeing Michelle's Olympic programs for this year. And 2 days before Skate America, we get shocking news that Michelle and Frank Carroll have split up. The timing is beyond bizarre. To this day, it's beyond bizarre that you would part with your coach of, at that point in time, 10 years? I mean, they start training with Frank in 1991, so you had if 10 years right before an Olympic season. It was crazy. And we never got an explanation. To this day, we've never got an explanation. I don't think we're ever going to get an explanation. Carol is on record as saying, I thought there was nothing we couldn't work through. I think she's having a lot of trouble with her own head. I think right now she doesn't understand herself and what's going on. That's what he said a few days after their split. And in a conference call before Skate America, Michelle said, it must be earth-breaking news, but for me at this moment, it's the right decision. I think the person who knows best is me. And so after Frank's death, just this year in June, Michelle had this to say about Frank. Frank was everything I could have hoped for in a coach and more, a rock-solid supporter. He never missed a lesson, a fountain of knowledge on and off the ice, and a dear friend. Whatever difficulties that they may have had when they split, they obviously worked those out sometime and still were able to be cordial and, according to Kwan, still be a friend after the fact. Whatever reasons that those were, Frank obviously took that to his grave, and frankly, I believe that Michelle will too. But Michelle would go on to remain coachless for the rest of the season. And so, including the Olympics, most of the time it was her dad, Danny Kwan, who was in the kiss and cry with her. And so, after she wins Skate America, she goes to Skate Canada, and we have what ends up being a foreshadowing of the Olympics. Sarah Hughes won that. She was first going into the short program. She was only third in the free skate, but ended up winning overall. Irina was fourth after the short program and won the free skate, but didn't have the ordinal placements to skip above Sarah. And Michelle didn't have her best event. She was second in the short and third in the free, and so she was third. And so again, we look at that podium and think, total fluke. It's not happening. Even though Sarah was the reigning bronze medalist, and of course, these days we would never have all three world medalists at the same Grand Prix in the fall. They would not see each other until the finals. That would be just impossible. But back then, they were able to skate in 3 Grand Prix, so that 2 that counted and like an extra one if they wanted. And so somehow they all ended up in the same Grand Prix with Sarah winning. So at the Grand Prix final, it was those 3 again, just in a different order. It was Irina first, Michelle second, and Sarah third. At this point, Maria Butriskaya had kind of fallen off. And of course, we didn't know this at the time, but this was actually Michelle's last Grand Prix final. And she ends that having only won the 1 Grand Prix final in 1996 and getting a whole lot of silvers. And so at Nationals, it is Michelle winning a national title yet again. And Sasha Cohen, who is back, is sandwiched in between her and Sarah Hughes, making Sarah Hughes kind of more of a forgotten person going into the Olympics, even though she has a pretty decent resume going into that. And so we go into Salt Lake City, which is a home Olympics. The ladies' event, like it does in most Olympics, closes out the whole thing. Michelle is on magazine covers. The pressure has to be tremendous at a home Olympics. The only thing that you would think maybe she's got going for is that she's done this before. She's been at the Olympics 4 years ago. She knows the pressure. She is a 3-time, 4-time world champion at this point, multiple-time national champion. She knows what it takes to win. So Michelle started off the year recycling her short program that she used in the previous year to East of Eden. At some point, she ends up switching back to her Rachmaninoff program that she did at the 98 Olympics, which was one of her signature pieces. It's a brilliant, brilliant piece. So she does that at the short program at the Olympics and is in first place. Coming into the free skate, it is Michelle in first, Irina in second, Sasha Cohen in third, Sarah Hughes in fourth. And so in order for Sarah to win, she needs somebody else to beat Michelle. So the way the ordinals worked, if you were fourth, you needed help to win. But the top 3, they control their destiny. So Sarah goes out and skates, lights out, does 2 triple combinations, much like the Tara debate. There's lots of people who feels like those were cheated. Again, wasn't really reflected in the judging so much at that time. But she skates really brilliantly. Sasha Cohen does what Sasha Cohen does. She had a fall, skated well, but had a fall, and Sarah jumps above her and is in medal position when Michelle takes the ice with Irina left to skate. And Michelle's whole thing going into this Olympics, and really for the whole Olympic cycle, was she felt like she lost in Nagano because she didn't skate free. She felt like Tara skated with joy and didn't feel the pressure, and she's got to skate kind of that same way. And I understand where she's coming from, but Michelle had so many moments in her career, 96 worlds, 2000 worlds, 2001 worlds, where she was just freaking brilliant. And you do whatever mind tricks you've got to do as an athlete, but I don't think she had to change anything, you know? And most people say when you go into competition, especially something like the Olympics, you've got to treat it just like any other competition, right? If you treat it like it's the biggest competition of your life, it's going to be very difficult to be successful. So she comes out, and you can sort of tell in that first jump that she's a little tight. I think Sandra Bezic even mentioned she's a little tight. And she goes into that triple combination that I feel like she needed to land to beat Irina. Because in my mind, Irina's going to come out there and do 2 triple combinations. Michelle's got to do at least 1. So when she 2-foots the triple toe, the first triple toe, she just does a double toe after the second one. And so in my mind, she's already lost. Irina hasn't skated yet, but in my mind, Michelle can't win without a triple combination. And she goes on, she's skating to Scheherazade, which is very, great music, very popular Olympic skating choice. And she goes to this triple flip, and she basically falls. It's not a technical fall, her butt doesn't hit the ice, but she steps out, puts her hands down, it might as well be a fall. And at that point, Michelle's not winning. And she finishes strong, but you're so disappointed. But Irina hasn't gone yet. You also know that she can actually lose to Sarah in the long program and still win the Olympic gold medal. It's not the way that she would have liked to have won by any stretch of the imagination, but she could still win if Irina goes out there and finishes third, which is a definite possibility at this point. And because of the ordinal placements, Michelle is still in first, even though she loses to Sarah in the free skate at this point. Irina comes out there, does not land a triple. She's clean with the content that she has, so there's no falls in there. There's no almost falls like Michelle had. But then the question goes, okay, did Irina do enough? Because there was a question even at that point, did she do enough to win? I don't think anybody really thought so, but it was it was certainly a possibility, especially in the wake of all the craziness of the judging that happened at that Olympics and pairs and ice dance. It's kind of crazy. So there was really 3 scenarios when Irina came on the ice. One is she could win. If she won the free skate, she was going to win the Olympic title. The second scenario is she could finish second in the free skate, lose to Sarah, but beat Michelle, and she would end up with a silver. The third scenario was that she could finish third in the free skate. She would get the bronze, but Michelle would get the gold because only one person had beaten Sarah Hughes. And so it was close between Irina and Michelle. And I think you could definitely make the argument if Michelle does not put her hand down on that triple flip, if she somehow lands that triple flip, she's Olympic champion. Because while she would lose to Sarah Hughes in the free skate, Irina probably doesn't beat her with Michelle as clean, and Irina didn't do a triple. And so even though it may have not been the way she wanted to win, she would have done enough with that judging system to have won the gold medal. But instead, Irina does enough to beat Michelle. Michelle finishes third. Sarah's able to jump over and leapfrog her in the standings. And Michelle finishes with the bronze, which is a step below where she was in Nagano. Now, she wasn't as dominant in that season leading up like she had been leading up to the Nagano Olympics. She didn't lose a single competition that season except for the Olympics. Here, she had lost at Skate Canada to Sarah and Irina, and she had lost it at the Grand Prix final to Irina. So it was, going into that Olympics, though, you felt like it was Michelle or Irina's. It felt like it did 4 years prior. Like, this is either Michelle or Tara. It's going to be one of them. It's not going to be anybody else. So Sarah obviously was a huge wild card that nobody really saw coming. And once again, Michelle found herself not reaching what she wanted to reach in her home country. And she decided that she's going to continue on. And I just want to share something that Phil Hirsch wrote on his blog after Frank Carroll announced his retirement from skating in 2018. And he says, whether she might have won gold with Carroll still at her side remains a tantalizing question. And it is, because it was strange for her to part ways with her coach. Now, she was paired with Frank Carroll in Nagano, and she lost in Nagano, so there's nothing to say that that was any way a contributor to her not winning in Salt Lake City. At the end of the day, you've got to go out there and skate the best, right? But it always kind of leaves that lingering question, that little bit of taste in your mouth of shoulda, coulda, woulda. But at the Worlds a month later, Michelle continues to compete, and as does Irina. And for me, that's one of those Worlds that could have gone either way. Irina ends up winning. I feel like the judges basically gave her a Lifetime Achievement Award. Like, she hasn't won a Worlds yet. Let's toss her a world title. After this season, in the summer of 2002, Michelle starts working with Scott Williams. So she finally does hire a coach, and the march is on now for yet another Olympics. She only competes at Skate America this season and next season as well. In fact, she does not compete in the 2004 Grand Prix when they actually implement IJS. And I think that this is an interesting point because Michelle never does compete in the international judging system until the 2005 Worlds, and it doesn't go well for her when we get there. Even so, she comes to nationals, and Sarah Hughes returns as Olympic champion, and Sarah Cohen comes in as the Grand Prix final champion, having just beaten Arina Slutskaya, and is coming in pretty heavily hyped. It doesn't live up to the hype. Like, I remember leading up to this, it was like, oh my gosh, we've got Olympic champion Sarah Hughes versus Michelle Kwan versus Grand Prix final Sasha Cohen. Like, it's a battle of the Titans. And I think we all kind of knew that, Sarah wasn't really ready to be at nationals. We were all surprised she was there. She had spent a lot of time touring and doing all kind of specials and all the things that were available for Olympic champions at that particular point in time. And Sasha had a really good fall, but also had a knack for making mistakes. And so at nationals, actually, it ends up with Sasha being third. Michelle wins yet again. And Sarah Hughes actually ends up kind of getting a surprise silver medal. And Michelle has now won her 6th national title in a row and her 7th overall. And she wins the world title, which is held in Washington, D.C. So her last home Worlds, and really with relative ease, no real competition from anybody at this point. After that season, even with the success of winning another world title, she actually parts ways with Scott Williams, and she ends up choosing to work with Rafael Arturian, who we now know is, of course, big, major deal, working with Nathan Chen and, Ashley Wagner and Adam Rippon. But at the time, he was little known, and everybody scratched their head like, who? Michelle Kwan, 5-time world champions working with who? It was very strange, but he was known to be a technical coach. And the knock on Michelle was always that technically she wasn't there, and we're moving into some kind of new judging system. We don't exactly know what that looks like in the fall of 2003, but it's likely going to require Michelle to up the technical ante some. So in that realm, it made sense, but it was a bit strange at the time that I can definitely remember. So she competes at Skate America that year, the last Skate America that we see her in. And at the 2004 Nationals, Sarah has moved on, and Sasha has now risen as the skater to beat. And she beats Michelle in the short program. And in the long program, she gets a 6 in presentation, even with the fall. And so a lot of us are thinking, this is it. This is the nationals that Sasha finally wins. This is the nationals that Michelle finally loses, because she had won so many titles in a row. You think, who can keep up this kind of consistency? And we really hadn't seen Michelle compete, because she had just competed at Skate America and had similar trek the season before. And she pulls out what is arguably, and in my opinion, the absolute best performance of her career in that 2004 Nationals in that free skate. I still get chills watching that last minute of that program when I watch it. I remember exactly where I was watching that live on a Saturday night, sitting on my couch with my then boyfriend. It was just absolutely incredible. I think I teared up because I think I was starting to question if Michelle still had that in her. Even though she won Worlds the previous year, it really didn't seem like there was really any competition there for her. I really hadn't felt like we had seen a performance of that caliber from her since the 2001 Worlds. And it was just really incredible. And so she goes to Worlds, and you're thinking, well, she's gonna pull another rabbit out of her hat and win. But she gets a time violation in the short program for going 2 seconds over. Now, this is the same short program that she did at Worlds the year prior. And US did submit a protest for it that was denied. The music had ended, but your time ends when you end. And so people believe that maybe, when that last movement that she does and the end of that Feeling Begins short program, I think she was continuing to move the arm or something. Crazy enough, she ends up with a time violation. Now, again, this is before IJS. There's not a specific point time violation like there is now. So what they were supposed to do back then was subtract 0.1 points on both marks. It wasn't something that was necessarily enforced, but was supposed to be enforced. And so as a result of that, she ended up 4th in her short program. And so the qualifying rounds were back, and so she had not had a great qualifying round, and that didn't help. And in the free program, she was, again, amazing. She actually got 6 perfect scores for presentation, but she was still only 2nd in the free, and she was only able to pull up to 3rd. Now, she kept this amazing streak that she had alive of finishing in the top 3 at every single competition that she had entered since the fall of 1995. But you kind of left that Worlds feeling like she wasn't the 3rd best skater there. You felt like she should have got silver at least. Shizuka Arakawa, who won that Worlds, did skate the performance of her life, but they had a weird judging system back then because they were kind of experimenting with a lot of different judging systems. And so this was the last Worlds that they had the 6.0 system. So what they were doing is they had like a zillion judges, not a zillion, 17 or something. They had a lot more than 9. So they would have all these scores, and then they would have this randomization system where it would randomize what of those scores was picked. It was super weird. It made no sense. And I think that was a bit of a factor too. I'm sure that there was a way that Michelle could have won the free skate if the highest numbers had been picked and all of that kind of, it was crazy. But even so, despite the fact that she had the time violation, she didn't have a great qualifying group, she still managed to get on the podium, but she did lose to her teammate Sasha Cohen in a competition what I believe was the first time in her career, and it would only happen one other time. But all right. So that ended the 2004 season. So here we are. We are 2 years out for the Olympics. We go into the 2004-2005 season, and Sasha Cohen was out all fall with an injury. Michelle did not compete in the Grand Prix for the first time since the 98-99 season when she was a full-time student. So I believe, from what I can remember, there was probably the least amount of buzz that we had in a while, kind of going into that nationals that season, because we hadn't seen either of the ladies before then, even though we had 2 women on the podium at Worlds the previous year. And Michelle won easily. It was, I think Sasha had a good short program, if I remember correctly, but Michelle just kind of like, again, just had this program. It was really strong, and you were like, yep, you remind me every single time. Like, why on earth would I ever doubt you? This was the last year that they had the 6.0 system at nationals, and Michelle chose to skate to Bolero, and she had it choreographed by Christopher Dean. If you listen to the podcast, you know I do not love Bolero as music, and I didn't love it when Michelle Kwan did it either. I thought that it was a pretty underwhelming performance to get a lot of 6.0s where they were just kind of giving them away as candy because they were never going to have them again. So she had a, scoring wise, they seemed like they really loved her program, but it felt kind of underwhelming to me, and I wasn't sure that it was going to be enough to beat Irina, who had been out with an illness and had not been a factor the previous 2 seasons, but who was back on with a vengeance, winning 2 Grand Prix in the fall and winning Grand Prix final. I mean, in fact, just throwing this in there, that free skate at nationals was so underwhelming. I think I would have given it to Kimmy Meissner, quite honestly. Like, I just was like, oh, it just wasn't exciting to me. But anyway, moving on. So getting to Worlds, Michelle was once again underwhelming in her qualifying. And then I think she was fifth going into that because I think she tied for third. Yeah, if you were third in the qualifying group, then you went in tied for fifth into the short program. And so she was third in the short program behind Irina and Sasha, and third in the long program as well. But the 6.0 system was gone. The ordinals were gone, and we now had the IJS. And Michelle missed out on the podium by 0.37 points to Carolina Costner. And if you look at the judging from that Worlds, Michelle got a lot of level ones, level twos, and she chose not to compete in the Grand Prix that fall and sort of get some kind of an idea of how things were being scored. The US chose not to implement the scoring position, that new scoring at their nationals before an Olympic season as well. And so this was sort of her first real test. And for the first time since 1995, she was not on a podium. And we didn't know it at the time, but this would be her final international competition. But after that competition, it was really clear that she was going to have to change some things, and she badly needed to be back in the Grand Prix competing. She was going to need to figure out, how to get the most out of points, because you remember, and it's still the case, and it bugs me to death, but one of the reasons Irina scored so many points, at that 2005 Worlds, which she was fantastic. I mean, that's probably the best performance of her career that she had I believe it was at home in Russia too. She did like 95 Billman spins, which gives you all the points. And at that time, she was one of the only people doing Billman spins. And so she was able to get more points on her spins than other people were. I think she actually maybe even had like too many triple Salchows in that free skate. But it was really good. That's if I were ever to rank Irina's programs, which I don't ever plan on doing that, but that free skate that she does would definitely be number one. It was really good. But anyway, so she's so desperate for help that she even approaches Tatiana Tarasova in that summer to help her in sort of the lead up. But unfortunately, she suffers an injury. She gets a ligament strain in her right hip, and she had largely, been able to avoid major injuries for, most of her career. But, at this point, she was 25 years old. She'd been competing senior since she was 12. And so she ended up having to withdraw from all of her 3 planned events, which was a Campbell Soup International Skating Challenge, Skate America, and Cup of China. And so we would see her in December of 2005, and she would return to the ice in this Marshall's Figure Skating Challenge against Sasha Cohen. It was a joke of a competition, but this was kind of the state of affairs of what you had sort of in this season. The pro circuit was definitely starting to die, and so they were starting to use more amateurs in competition, because a lot of the pro competitors had kind of started to move on, and there hadn't been a real influx of amateurs into the pro circuit, because like Tara Lipinski skated pro for a while, but she had this bad hip injury. Sarah Hughes skated pro for maybe like a year, maybe 2, and then she went off to Harvard, right? And did amazing, has become a lawyer and all of these amazing things. And so they just didn't have a real influx of professional skaters anymore, especially from the US ranks. So because of that, a lot of those kind of competitions that used to be pro-am just started being amateurs. And so it was literally Michelle Kwan versus Sasha Cohen. At that event, Michelle debuts her short program choreographed by Tatiana Tarasova to Totentanz. She double-footed her triple lutz and she popped her triple flip. So it wasn't her best skate, but that was the only time that we saw that Olympic short program that she had planned. And then the free program, because again, it's like an exhibition style competition. They do an exhibition for the free skate. She did like a number to You Raise Me Up. Again, not real strong with the jumps. I think we were all kind of questioning, is she going to be ready for nationals? Is she going to be ready for the Olympics? Is she just rusty? It was an audience vote that determined the winner. So she ends up winning by the audience vote, 59% to 41% to Sasha, largely just because unpopularity, right? All 3 judges in quotation marks that were there, Terry Gannon, Peggy Fleming, and Dick Button, the commentators at that time, all gave their votes to Sasha, who was brilliant in that particular program. It was her Romeo and Juliet exhibition number that she did that she turned into her competitive program that year also. So the competition was meaningless, but at least Michelle was back on the ice, but it would be short-lived because she would have to withdraw from nationals and be unable to defend her title and go for that record 10th title, which, let's be honest, she probably would have won, had she been healthy. So she had to petition for a spot at the 2006 Olympics. She easily was put on the team. She showed readiness. That was a stipulation. And then she was headed to her third Olympics. And unfortunately, she would suffer even a greater heartbreak than she had the previous two Olympics because she suffered a groin injury in her first practice and she had to withdraw. So this is a piece that was written by Elena Vatsikovskaya, a Russian writer, from February 12th, 2006. It was called Michelle Kwan, A Bitter End. And I read in quote, "In Torino, her problems were aggravated. The alpine climate often became dangerous for people with rheumatic conditions. Perhaps Kwan should have arrived to the games a bit earlier. A 9-hour time difference requires at least 9 days to acclimate. Perhaps then Michelle could have adjusted well and under less pressure, and then could have built up her training intensity to the usual levels. But she ignored her pain and plunged into the games headfirst. She had trouble sleeping at night because she was in so much pain, but didn't even permit herself to think that she may not be able to hit the Olympic ice one more time. The opening ceremony was the last straw. After a few hours in the cold, Michelle understood it was all over. She came to practice the next day after another sleepless night. Through superhuman efforts, she prepared for a triple jump. She failed. She tried again and collapsed on the ice again. After the third unsuccessful try, she could barely glide off the ice. And next was her press conference. It was so sad, and it was made even sadder, honestly, when the results of the women's event happened at the Olympics, and Suzuka Arakawa won with only 5 triples. Sasha won a silver medal with 2 falls, and Irina won a bronze with a fall. And everybody thinks, and I think Michelle even made a comment for it after the effect, like, how do you feel seeing that the Olympics were won by someone who only had 5 triples? And, Michelle could do 5 triples in her sleep usually, right? And I think Michelle she had just come to terms and be like, it just clearly was not meant to be. And it was unfortunate because you felt like watching that event that Michelle could have won, but she could have won at 98, and she also could have won in 2002, and it just wasn't to be. She didn't rule out waiting for one more attempt at 2010. She said she wasn't retiring yet. And then after sitting out the 2006-2007 season, she said she would decide in 2009 whether to return for one more try. But ultimately, she chose to focus on graduate school. And this is what Kwan says. She says, after those 2006 Olympics, if I had been 22, then maybe I would have tried to make it to 2010. But I was 26 and I had other interests like going back to school and pursuing a master's degree in foreign policy. I had many chapters of my life ahead of me, and I felt like it was time to turn the page. So Michelle never officially retired. There was no official statement or press conference to this day. There was no pro career. She just seamlessly transitioned until the next phase of her life in international relations and in politics. She was mentored and inspired by Secretary of State Dr. Condoleezza Rice into first studying politics and international relations at University of Denver, and then attaining a master's in international law and diplomacy from Tufts University. She had a position created for her, public policy envoy, by Condoleezza Rice. And after earning her master's degree in 2011, she moved to D.C. to work at the State Department as a senior advisor to the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. She also served as an advisor to Secretary Clinton, U.S.-China Women's Leadership Exchange and Dialogue, and then she also later joined her presidential campaign. And at this point, she is currently serving as a U.S. ambassador to Belize, and she's become a mom. So her legacy, of course, is unparalleled. She had 5 world titles, 9 national titles, which is tied for the record with Maribel Vincent-Owen, 2 Olympic medals. So, like Nancy Kerrigan, 2 Olympic medals, neither gold, but still very impressive, and even more impressive than Nancy's because hers were 4 years apart. And then she had that incredible 10-year medal streak from 1995 to 2005 of medaling at every event that she entered. And really, she only had a handful, not even 5, I don't think, where she was third. most of them she was first or second, which that kind of consistency you just don't see. And obviously part of that was because of that desire and that dream to get a gold medal that she wouldn't make it, but she is so beloved and she was such a fantastic skater. And with that being said, it is now time to delve into her programs. I knew this podcast was probably going to be about an hour and a half, so we are an hour in as I get ready to talk about all 25 of Michelle Kwan's programs. So she beats Hubble and Donahue, who I did 22 of their programs last year, and only missing one program. No one on YouTube seems to have Michelle's short program from the 92-93 season, and nobody even knows what she skated to because it's not even on Wikipedia either. So, all right, let's delve into these 25 programs. I'll probably keep it, pretty short and sweet, so this podcast isn't like 5 hours. All right, so number 25. I have her long program to Miss Saigon from the 92-93 season, which is her first senior season. Usually you're going to see a lot of times these programs sort of be at the bottom of the list. They're just getting their feet wet, right? I mean, at this point, she's just kind of like a jumping bean. It's just like skate, jump in the program. So you can sort of see the beginnings of her technical prowess at this stage, but artistry definitely has not quite developed. And then number 24 is her East of Eden Part 1. So she actually used East of Eden for her long program music back in the 93-94 season, which was the first Olympic season that she was involved in. Not a lot of choreography in this routine. It seems like she's always prepping for another jump. I think she has a nice spread eagle in there, and I do see some improvement over the 93 year. But again, it's a long way away from what we would later see of Michelle. At number 23, I have her 94-95 short program to Yellow River Piano. I watched this one probably 3 times. I just kept zoning out of it. I found it a little bit boring. It still feels very junior. Even at this point, this is her 3rd senior season and the season that she comes in sort of as the number 1 U.S. lady. I do give her grace because she's only 14. She doesn't have as much extension with her arms. She has a decent spiral, but she doesn't really hold the positions for very long. So it's just a very, for me, rather forgettable program. At number 22, I have her 93-94 short program to Song of India. And I feel like in this program, she gets a little bit of an opportunity to sort of breathe and perform. There's like a little section at the end that kind of sounds like Flight of the Bumblebee, and it's just really fun. You can see a lot of joy in her skating. She just has a double Lutz as her solo jump. I don't know why, because she does a triple Lutz as her combination jump. So she's just showing off the Lutz here. And she's actually only one of 4 people in the women's field at the 94 Nationals that's doing a triple Lutz double toe. So it's just a different time. They weren't quite at the technical level that you would see just 4 years later at the 98 Nationals. All right. Moving on to number 21, this is her long program from 94-95, Introduction and Rondo Capricioso. Probably butchered that. Do the best I can. So the jumps were there, but the presentation just wasn't quite there. She wasn't quite feeling it to her bones like we would later see in even the next season. She skates again, with a lot of joy. I think you start to see the elements of something special, but there's still a lot of arm pumping and stroking. I think there is more purpose to her arm movement and more grace. Technically, she's really brilliant at times, and she ends strong. I love the great scratch spin that she does at the end. But ultimately, all of these programs in her first 3 senior seasons are kind of at the bottom of her programs in general. Just the quality isn't there. The artistry isn't developed yet. All right, number 20, I have her 99-2000 short program to A Day in the Life. So this is definitely later Michelle Kwan. This is after she's won national titles and world titles and even Olympic medal at this point. But I just felt like this number was a little weird. It's like a jazzy number, which Michelle does a lot of different types of music. She does all of them usually pretty well. And I think this is fine too. I think this is also right at the peak criticism for Michelle. Like I mentioned earlier, she finally added the triple flip to replace the triple toe, but I just don't think she really ever connects to this music. I feel like she's skating to it. But sometimes in her performances, even before this season, she really just kind of becomes the music. And I don't really feel like that's the case here. At number 19, I have her 2005-2006 short program to Toten Taunts. So it might even be somewhat controversial for me to even have this program on here because it wasn't ever competed internationally, but it's the only thing that we got from her in that last season. It's the last time that we saw her in any capacity, really, as a figure skater, outside of a show or two after this that she did years later. So, I mean, it was to become her Olympic figure skating short program, and she was on the team. Obviously, we didn't see the best that it had to offer when she did it. It's kind of ominous music, and like I mentioned before, she made some mistakes in the program, which doesn't really help. She has like the trademark Michelle Kwan footwork in here that she really adopted post the 2002 Olympics once she started working with Nikolai Morozov and Tatiana Tarasov for some of her programs, and they were behind a lot of Alexei Yagudin's programs, and he was famous for doing those big footwork sequences kind of at the end. I just felt like the music kind of seemed like an odd choice for her. There is one thing that you do notice in here, and I have an entire playlist of all of these programs that I'll link in the show notes. And so you can go back and look at some of these programs, but she does do a catch foot layback, which was, as you know, now in IJS, you pretty much have to have a catch foot layback if you want to get a decent score on your spin. So she did have that. She had incorporated that into this particular program where she was making those changes to better maximize her points in that new scoring system. All right, in number 18, I have her 2004-5 long program to Bolero. I think this music would have been a better choice for her for a short program, maybe even for an Olympic program a year later. I think that could have come in with a ton of hype. She does have like a 3-jump combo in there, which is not something that Michelle typically had. She did do a triple Lutz, double toe, double loop, which 3-jump combos were kind of a big into that kind of time frame as a way to try to attempt to get some more technical points from the judges. There's just not a lot of build in this program, which is what I feel like is the issue with Bolero in general. I think that by the time the tempo increases at the end, you're just kind of bored. So this program just never really did a lot for me. I think her skating skills are there, the quality is there, but I'm just not invested. It doesn't draw me in like so many of her other programs do. Number 17, I have another maybe somewhat controversial program. This was her second long program that she used at Grand Prix Final. And the 2000-2001 season, it's to the Miraculous Mandarin. And it's not technically skated very well at that particular competition, but it's very interesting music. And she kind of leans into her Asian roots here. And unfortunately here, it just didn't really seem like a complete program yet, but I think it really could have been developed into a really powerful program. I think the footwork throughout the program was really strong. I love the spread eagles that she does. A lot of people I've seen on forums over the years think that she really could have developed this into even, maybe perhaps a better choice for an Olympic program over Scheherazade even. But I added it because she did compete it, so it was there, and it wasn't the worst that she did by any stretch. Okay, this next program I know is going to be controversial for a lot of people because I know a lot of people love her East of Eden short program. People say that every time they hear it, when Gracie Gold used it a few years ago, when Danny and Ellie used it last year, they're like, oh my God, every time I hear East of Eden, it makes me think of Michelle Kwan. I watched this a few different times. All of these routines that I'm ranking, I watched at least twice. Some of them I watched as many as 5 times. I watched them at different competitions to see them perform differently. This East of Eden program, I felt like she had a different dress every time she performed it. She used it not just in this season, but also at the beginning of the Olympic season leading up to Salt Lake City as well. And it is easy and light. There is like this really nice simplicity to it. But I just find it boring. I'm sorry. It's just not my favorite Michelle Kwan program. It's just very forgettable to me. And so when I think of East of Eden, I know Michelle skated to it. It's just not one of my favorite programs. And so, yeah, it's number 16 for me. Sorry. All right. Number 15 is her 96-97 long program to Taj Mahal. Unfortunately, this season, Michelle really wasn't at her best, so I don't know that we ever saw this program really what it was capable to. The music is great. Both skating dresses that she uses are beautiful. The opening position is just really stunning. She has great control. There's just really great expression in the middle section. She does like a lut to Salchow and a double axel, just like all right at the end. And I feel like the middle slow section really works, but it does start to feel like it drags a little bit in the middle too. It's another kind of character piece and follow up to the previous year's Salomon, which we haven't gotten to yet on this list. But I thought this would probably be a little bit higher, but it's just kind of right, kind of in the middle for me. And frankly, a lot of Michelle's programs, like the really good ones are easy to put at the top, and the really, early ones are easy to put at the bottom. There's a lot in the middle. I feel like in this next section that you could sort of put interchangeably. They're all, very similarly well performed, not as memorable as some of the others, but I do feel like they're a step above the ones that have preceded it. Number 14, I have her 2002-2003 long program to Concierto de Aranjuez. Oh, I know I butchered that. It's like a Spanish or flamenco kind of style music, which I think it's a good program. I don't think it's one of her most memorable programs, largely because at this point she had so many good ones, because this is now the last Olympic cycle that we'll see Michelle compete in. So she has a lot of good programs at this point. And so the musical choice is fine, but I don't think it stands out like a lot of the pieces do above it, but she does perform it really well. Number 13, I have her 98-99 short program to Fate of Carmen. She calls it Fate of Carmen. It is her one piece to Carmen, the overused piece of music that is Carmen. I think at least she doesn't use Habanera, which is super overused. And at least she uses it for a short program and not a long program. I don't think she's really necessarily trying to become Carmen. It's just kind of really a fun piece of music. She brings so much emotion to this program when the few times that we saw her competed, which I think was twice maybe internationally. The footwork is really great, just like right on that percussion, right into the connecting steps, into the triple toe. So this is a program that was a lot higher than I would have expected it to be, because it's not one that I really necessarily remembered, whereas a lot of these other programs above it were really memorable to me. But it was one that as I watched it, I just felt like it was better than some of the other programs that maybe I would have thought would have been higher. So yeah, this one is number 13. All right, number 12. This is her 2001-2002 long program, which would be her second Olympic free skate to Scheherazade. And I just kind of felt like it's hard, let me just give this disclaimer when it comes to this particular program. It is so hard for me to separate this program with the disappointment that was the 2002 Olympics, because for me, this program was just kind of okay. I didn't love it. And so when I go back and watch it, I usually feel one of two ways about it. I either feel like, meh, or I feel like, it's better than what I thought. I don't hate it for an Olympic choice. I mean, obviously, Evan Lysacek used it 4 years later to great success in the 2010 Olympics. And 4 years after that, right, like Davis and White use it very successfully to win their Olympics. So it is very popular music. It's great music. I just feel like And it's very similar pieces of music to what Michelle used in the past. Salome, Taj Mahal. I think it's just not what I wanted. And so it sort of has that bit of baggage for me. Now, it's still in the top 12. It's still in the top half of all of her programs, and I still think it's good. I think that Tosca, which we haven't gotten to yet, is a more successful version of this. Right outside the top 10 is her 1995-96 short program to Esperanza. And so this is one of, I think, 2 short programs that she does where she starts with a spiral sequence, which is really different. It kind of sets a different tone when you start with a spiral sequence versus just going straight into your first jump, either a combination or a double axel. And she skates with a lot of confidence, really, this whole season, which helps to sell the programs that she has this season a lot more. The music starts very slow. It sort of picks up in the middle for her connecting steps into her triple toe. And this is a program that, to me, it's another one that when I watch it, it rises up in the standings of her other programs because it just has so much presence to it, and it's just skated so well. It's something from earlier in her career that ends up, just right outside of the top 10 here at number 11. Also really love her outfit in that one too. All right, so into the top 10 we go, and these are all just some really, really top programs. So, all right. Number 10, we have her 96-97 short program that she calls Dream of Desmona? Desmona? Something. It's to orchestral suite number 3. Like, Michelle had a knack for, like, naming programs as opposed to just calling it, the piece of music. But, yeah, Dream of Desmonda. It's like violin music, and I feel like this is just really Michelle at her best. I think it really is the bones for what becomes her Olympic programs a year later. This is another one that she had that spiral sequence to start that I just really love. And it's one that I really totally forgot about. Like, if you had asked me before I started doing these programs, what was Michelle's short program, 96-97? I'd have no idea. I would know Taj Mahal was the long program. I remember that, but I couldn't remember her short program to save my life. And then I watched and I was like, this is so good. Like, it's so good. So here it is in the top 10. All right, number 9 is her 2004-2005 short program to Spartacus. I think this is a really underrated program. This was at a point in her career she was not competing as much and she was not as consistent. It has a little bit of elements of Tosca, what she'd used the year before, and Scheherazade. It doesn't feel like the moves in this particular one match the music as well as some of her other programs, especially like the ending footwork, but the spiral is so great on the music, and I thought her nationals performance of this was really good, and it was kind of one of those moments. It's like, by the way, yeah, I'm still here. You're still going to have to beat me. So it was really strong. All right. Number 8, this is her 95-96 long program to Salome. So this was after the glow up. It has probably the most iconic dress of all of her skating dresses that she used over the years. It's just got this flair of drama. I feel like Michelle was really good in a lot of her programs at really selling the middle section, because this peak 90s skating is like you start off with a bang, you have this sort of slow section in the middle. Some people will call it the smoke break. And you sort of end with a bang. And Michelle was really great with that. If you look at, she doesn't have a formula necessarily in her skates, but that might come the closest to it. And this early long program from her that she had so much success with was really sort of the epitome of that, and it really, really working. And I think the music change right after the triple Lutz is very dramatic. There's just so much attack. And at this point in her career, like, she's the one chasing. She hasn't yet reached the pinnacle. And everything after this is everybody chasing Michelle. But at this point, she was on the rise. And it was just such a big move and big shift in what we had seen from her. And this is another program that I'll always remember, but I did not think it would be this high on the list, because I thought a program from her early part of her career is just not going to compare as much as some of the later ones, but it definitely still holds up. All right, number 7, I have her 98-99 long program to Lamente Darien. So it's kind of classical with a little bit of drama at the end. I just find it very compelling. I can't necessarily put my finger on it, but she just draws you in, and every piece of choreography is just well placed. This was a season that she didn't compete in the Grand Prix. We only saw it a couple times, and it probably didn't really see it at its best, but even with that, it's still very, very high on my list because it just stands out. All right, number 6 is her 99-2000 long program to the Red Violin. This is really kind of a pretty dramatic piece of music, kind of trademark Michelle music, very expressive in her arms. I think if you look at Michelle early in her career, I think I even mentioned it in one of her earlier programs, in this countdown, she would do a lot of arm pumping, a lot of just, a lot of stroke in the ice. And she's still stroking the ice in her later years, but she really camouflages the movements with her arms so much better. And it really works. It doesn't have that same feel that it had when you saw her do it in 94 or in 95. And she does a lot of jumps right off the bat. I really love the circular footwork into the back Charlotte spiral that she does. And this is another one of his programs I watched several different times, and it just never feels like 4 minutes. It just goes by so fast. And the best performance of this was definitely that Worlds performance that she did and came from behind and won her 4th world title. No, 3rd? You lose count. 3rd world title. All right, we have reached the top 5. So number 5 is her 2002 to 2004, because she used this short program for 2 seasons, to The Feeling Begins. And Feeling Begins is just really great music. I think it was originally made famous by Oksana Bayul in a professional competition back in the early 90s. And then Grishik and Platov skated to it. And it's been one of those that just kind of, you hear it, in some variation, maybe not every season, but really quite often. So I was really surprised when Michelle picked it for music, and I was so curious as to how her expression of it was going to be. I think it has a little bit of a nod to Salome. I really like the footwork into the triple flip that she does with the music. The footwork is so strong because this is the season where Michelle really starts to incorporate that big footwork sequence into the end part of her programs. She's got really great speed, and I just love the intensity that she brings, and she just does drama really, really well. And there was a couple of performances of this. The one that comes to mind is probably the performance of it at the 2003 World Championships, with the home crowd just going nuts for her. Towards the end, you can't even really hear the end of the music. It's just so good. All right, number 4. This is her 2000-2001 long program to Song of the Black Swan. This is another program I did not think would be as high on the list. It would be high on my list of all-time great Michelle Kwan performances, because this came on the heels of just a season where Irina Slutskaya was beating her. We hadn't seen Michelle really at her best. She wasn't great at nationals. We hadn't seen her do the triple toe in a long time. And it's just a gorgeous program. There's so much great emotion at the end of this program, especially when she performed it at that 2001 World. You could see how much she wanted that title. But I love the nod to the Nancy Kerrigan spiral. I love the split jump. She's got this great section of the middle. I love her connecting steps into her camel spin. She has a layback in the opposite direction. It's just really fantastic. Just really love this program. And probably an underrated one too. All right, number 3. This is another one I didn't think would be that high on the list, because I remember the drama of the moment when she performed this at the 2004 Nationals. As I mentioned earlier, I know where I was. I got chills. I still get chills. But just opening to end, this routine is just so dramatic. It's choreographed by Nikolai Morozov, which is a pairing that we probably never thought we would see, right? We thought, she would use Lori Nickel into the end of the day, but when she parted ways with Frank Carroll, then she started getting different choreographers. And she just uses in the swells of the music more than I feel like she normally does. The ending footwork sequence is just brilliant. And combined with the emotion that she brings to this is just one of the all-time great programs that she has. And like I said, her performance at that 2004 Nationals, I think, is her absolute greatest performance of all time. It's just a really fantastic program with some really overused piece of music. All right, so we're to the top 2, which the top 2 are the top 2. You make a Michelle list, and you don't have her 2 programs from the 97-98 season, I don't even know what you're doing, right? It has to be these 2 programs. It's just a matter of which one you pick. And I actually flip-flopped them for my original ranking. And I actually went with her short program as number 2. And the opening is just so iconic, right? The running, it's just her signature program. I love her arm movements between the elements. I love her holding her edges after the jumps. The music selection is just perfection. This is music that was really intended for her sister Karen to use in that season, and they just could not find a piece of music that they liked for her at all. And there's this great story in Christine Brennan's book, Edge of Glory, about how like not Sandra Bezic, Lori Nickel is faxing Michelle Kwan like why she thinks she needs to skate to this music, and because this is 1997, and we don't have widespread use of cell phones, and the internet is still dial up in a lot of places, and so faxing is where it's at. So it's just such a great program, so iconic that she brought it back to life at the 2002 Olympics as well. And it was almost number one. It was so close to being number one. But number one is that long program from the same season, that Lyra Angelica. And it's what you want in an Olympic program. Not just to be the best program of your career, which I believe that it is, but it's one of those that I feel like no one else could do this program. And you could probably say that about a lot of Michelle's programs, but I think when I think about somebody like Sasha, who has such great artistry, like I think you could give Sasha some of these, The Feeling Begins, or some of these programs, and Sasha could pull it off, but I don't think anybody could do this program, this Lyra Angelica program, like Michelle. It was obviously best performed at 98 Nationals when she got all those sixes, and it was a little tighter at the Olympics than what she wanted. I didn't love her dress at the time. She had a different dress when she used it in the Grand Prix, and I preferred that dress, but now when I go back and look at it, like that dress is so much more distracting. And the dress that they ended up going with, they went with a more subtle dress because they wanted the skate to sort of speak for itself, and the whole thing just worked. And it's just brilliance in a bottle. And I don't think anybody else has attempted to skate to that music that I'm aware of. And if they have, it definitely doesn't ring a bell in my mind. But just a tremendous, tremendous program that was and is. And I definitely encourage you, if you became a skating fan post 2006 and you never got to experience Michelle skates, like definitely go back and watch them. If you don't want to watch them all, I get it, but go back and watch those top 5 programs and you will not be disappointed at all. So I just want to suggest, for further reading, if you love these kind of look backs, Christine Brennan's book, The Edge of Glory, is done in the lead up to the 98 Olympics. And it follows Michelle, it follows Taylor Lipinski, it follows Tanya Kwiatkowski, it follows some of the guy skaters, Scott Davis, I think Todd Eldridge is in there too, maybe even Ilya Kulik. There's several different ones. You get a little bit of their backstories, a little bit of what they've got going on all the way up and through the Olympics, and it's a really fascinating read. So I definitely recommend that if you want a little bit more look into what skating was like in this time period. All right, so here we are, an hour and a half in, and we made it. All right, thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. If you're on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. I know that this particular podcast is behind what I originally wanted it to be back in the summer. Boy, my summer did not at all go like I wanted it to, but I'm so glad to be able to share this with you guys now. You can find me at Ice Skate Podcast on any of the socials. You can email me at thecuttingedgepod@gmail.com, and feel free to like and subscribe and send me a line sometime and let me know what you think, and maybe if you agree or disagree with some of my choices in ranking her programs. I hope everybody has a great rest of your week.